Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. I am Jacqueline Scott, President of the UIA, and I am delighted to welcome all of you to this very first UIA Negotiation Laboratory, known as the UIA Med Lab. The UIA Med Lab is a very instructive, practical, and exciting program developed by the UIA's Prevention and Mediation Commission to teach best practices of sound mediation and negotiation. The Prevention and Mediation Commission is just one of the 42 commissions, committees, and working groups at the UIA, a multicultural, multilingual, global organization of lawyers, which, since its inception in 1927, almost 100 years ago, has brought lawyers together to network, share ideas and best practices, and perhaps most importantly, to defend and protect the independence of our profession and to promote and defend the rule of law. Today's seminar or webinar is just one of the roughly 25 programs and webinars a year that UIA sponsors, and each one, just like this one will certainly be, is a high-level and substantive program designed to make us better lawyers. UIA also has a very strong women's committee, an in-house lawyers committee, an LGBTQ+ committee, and several task forces that address the pressing issues of the day, such as artificial intelligence, the attorney-client privilege or lawyer secret, which is increasingly under attack, or the Convention on the Protection of Lawyers being proposed by the European Union. Finally, UIA has a terrific program called UIA Advance, which is designed to provide business development and cost-saving benefits to law firm members. I encourage all of you to go to our website and find out more about all that UIA offers. Now, turning to the topic at hand, which is why we are all here, improving our knowledge of best practices for mediation and negotiation will certainly benefit all of us in our professional lives and work, regardless of whether we are professional mediators or negotiators. As importantly, these skills also, the ability to negotiate well, can be invaluable in our personal lives, as anyone who has negotiated with a 6-year-old can attest. So I'm very excited to hear from the speakers today, who are certainly experts in this field, Lisa Morgan and Claude Amar, about how we can become better negotiators and use best practices in negotiation in every aspect of our lives. Now, before I conclude, I want to say that I am delighted to see so many participants with us today, both members of UIA and non-members. But for those of you who are not yet members, I want to let you know that we are delighted to have you join us today as we kick off our newest UIA training program. But in the future, we will be limiting MedLab sessions to participation by members only. So I encourage all of you who are not yet members to become members of the UIA. I assure you, not only will you benefit from the excellent future MedLab programs, but I know you will not be disappointed in the quality of any aspect of UIA's scientific programs. As importantly, and I speak from years of experience, I know you will so enjoy the many interesting colleagues you will meet and the many friends you will make along the way. So run, don't walk to uia.org and sign up so that you don't miss a minute of our future MedLab and other programs. Thank you very much for your time. And now allow me to turn the floor over to our current president of the Prevention and Mediation Commission, Lofty El Algeri. Lofty?
Thank you very much, President. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for being here today, and thank you very much to our illustrious speakers today, Mrs. Lisa Baker-Morgan and Mr. Claude Amar, who were very kind enough to give us their time and share with us their science and their vast experience within the framework of the UIA Med Lab, created within the framework of UIA Commission of Mediation and Conflict Prevention, at the suggestion of our friend Catherine Pulvé, who inherited its responsibility with the invaluable support of our friend Pierre Young. And I would like to thank both for their warmly, and I would like to thank them warmly for their commitment, their involvement, and their desire to make available to us, to you, both authentic, innovative, creative, and efficient tools that are likely to develop and, why not, revolutionize our skills as lawyers and as mediators, our outlook, our vision, our approach, our perception, our practice, and our effectiveness in dealing with the needs and the interests of our clients. I won't be long. Without further, I'd like to hand over to my friends, Catherine and Pierre, to introduce our guests and moderate our webinar, and wish you an excellent afternoon with us. The floor is yours, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Lofty, and thank you very much, Jackie, for your great introduction, support, and enthusiasm. And thanks to Pierre, of course, for our team work in the construction of the Med Lab. So this is today, it's the first capsule of a series of 4 for 2024 of this first UIA Med Lab. And so we are very proud to open this session. We construed this Med Lab in order to obtain or to gain a training program dedicated to negotiation. And so it has been created in the purpose of, in order to help participants to gain information and practice on practical tools in order to improve their practice as mediators. But not only, it's not dedicated only to mediators, it's also open and interesting for, in order to improve the practice in mediation, generally speaking, which is not only for mediators, but also for people assisting in the mediation process, so the parties themselves, but also the lawyers. So it's very, very important to be familiar with all these tools, either to use them or to recognize them in the course of the negotiation and be able to make a difference, identify the different tools, and master them in order to deploy them with success. So that's the objective of the Med Labs, and we are very, very happy and proud to start this first new session with Lisa Baker-Morgan and Claude Amar. So I'll leave it to Pierre now to start the presentation.
Okay, so today we will focus on 2 tools, very important tools. We will learn with Lisa and Claude how to be more creative in solving problems in a through mediation process, and how to determine the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So I will introduce Lisa. So Lisa is an American trial attorney from LA with a Master of Laws in International Arbitration and Dispute Resolution. Since 2011, Lisa split her time in between LA and Paris. With over 15 years experience in dispute resolution, Lisa now focuses her efforts on resolving conflicts as a negotiator. However, it is a surprise, but it is not all law and negotiation with Lisa. This former chef de cuisine spent 10 years as a private chef and instructor. Regardless of whether Lisa is cooking or mediating, Lisa believes that life is better when everyone sits down at the table together. And I am sure we will all agree. We can wait to hear you, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you, Pierre. And so Claude, Claude is an architect who has built hotels throughout the world, and who became a mediator after a major business dispute in several international jurisdictions. And now Claude is a full-time mediator trained by Gary Friedman, American, and a seasoned negotiator trained at the Harvard Program of Negotiation. He has developed several byproducts of mediation, and he is a strong believer that prevention is by far the best resolution technique. They have nearly an hour to present CPS and BATNA. And we will have, and we are on time, I mean, the timing is great, and we will have something like 20 minutes for the participants, for you, the participants, to raise questions and for us all together to exchange. Thank you very much. So, Lisa and Claude, the floor is yours.
Just maybe a precision. So maybe when we will manage the questions, and so we suggest that you enter your question on the icon Q&A, and if you want to make some comments, please enter your comments on the chat, and we will, with Catherine, manage the question at the end of the presentation of Claude and Lisa.
Yes, thank you, Pierre, for this. And also, you know, this training is in English. If there are some participants who need to have a translation for their questions from French to English, we can help. Pierre and myself, we are not translators, but we can help. But normally we are going to stay with the English language. Thank you, Claude, Lisa, Claude, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for your introduction. Thank you, Pierre, Jacqueline, and Lofty. It's a pleasure to be with you. We will start with BATNA, and before going to BATNA, I'd like to remind a few principles about principal negotiation. Principal negotiation, which is also known as the Harvard negotiation model, is a negotiation strategy that focuses on finding mutually beneficial solutions rather than just claiming your own interests. It's based on the idea that the negotiation should be seen as a problem-solving process rather than a battle. There cannot be a successful negotiation without preparation. And to prepare more effectively, we need to identify our goals, minimize surprises, and take advantage of opportunities as they arise at the negotiation table. In order to achieve such required preparation, we need to investigate the 7 elements seen both from our perspective as well as from the other side of the table. The 7 elements are interests, alternatives, relationships, options, legitimacy, communication, commitment. Interests are the fundamental drivers of negotiation, our basic needs, wants, and motivations. Interests are what underlies our position. Legitimacy, in other words, standards. The quest for a legitimate and fair deal drives many of our decisions in negotiation. To succeed, we need to put forth proposals that others will view as fair and legitimate. Relationships. Whether you have an ongoing connection with a counterpart or don't think you'll ever see her again, you need to effectively manage your relationship. Commitment. This can be defined as an agreement, demand, offer, or promise by one or more party. A commitment can range from an agreement to meet at a particular time and place to a formal proposal or to a signed contract. Communication. Whether you prepare to negotiate online, on the phone, or in person, you will take part in a communication process with the other party or parties. The success of your negotiation can hinge on your communication choices. Options. In negotiation, options refer to any available choices parties might consider to satisfy their interests, including conditions, contingencies, and trades. They can create value in negotiation and improve parties' satisfaction. Alternatives. As we take part in negotiation, we are to be aware of our alternatives away from the table. What we will do if the current deal doesn't pan out. Negotiation preparation must include an analysis of our BATNA. BATNA stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. Must include an analysis of our BATNA as well as our counterparts' BATNA. The BATNA is one of our today's topics. Lisa?
Thank you, Claude, for that beautiful introduction to our topic, alternative BATNA. As Claude said, BATNA is the standard to which you measure any negotiation against. It is your best alternative should your negotiations not pan out. The concept was introduced and created by Roger Fisher and William Ury in their 1981 book, Getting to Yes, Negotiating Without Giving In. Why is BATNA important? Why is it important to know what your best alternative is should your negotiations not work out? Well, first, your BATNA will provide your negotiating power and it encourages negotiations. The stronger your BATNA, the better your negotiating ability. It's interwoven with your leverage. If you have a strong BATNA, you've got negotiating power and more leverage. And if you have a less strong BATNA, you don't have as much leverage. Let me give you a very basic example. This always works. For example, you're an employee and you're interviewing for a job, right? And the job that you're interviewing for, they're offering $105,000. But you have another offer in your back pocket for $100,000. So your BATNA, should you not be able to negotiate a better, should you not be able to get this job, is $100,000. Your strength going into that interview is quite strong because you know if you can't argue for a better terms, you're still going to have $100,000. Compare that if you had no backup offer or the terms of a backup offer were significantly less. You would be more inclined to capitulate or be more agreeable in negotiations because it's more important for you to reach an agreement. The second reason the BATNA is so important is it allows you to make an informed decision. The BATNA will tell you what is minimally acceptable to reach a deal. And if you cannot reach your BATNA in negotiations, then you should not settle. Now, people always ask, well, isn't a BATNA a bottom line? No, not really, but they're two of the same ideas, and let me explain that. Both are boundaries, but a bottom line is very fixed. A BATNA is fluid in that it can be altered, and it changes with new information. The reason why a BATNA is so important in negotiations is because during the mediation phase, for example, you may find out important information that causes you to revise your BATNA. For example, say you're representing a defendant and you go into negotiations believing that your best case scenario, should you not be able to reach a deal, will be an exposure of $100,000. But you've found out during negotiations that your liability, your client's liability, they're going to be much more on the hook than just for half. You think now their exposure is much higher. It may be as much as $150,000. So your BATNA is gone down. Had you stayed with a bottom line of, say, $100,000, you would have rejected an offer that would have probably been in your best interest to accept. And the BATNA is flexible. It allows you to take that new information into account, to revise it one way or another. And that's an important distinction. The third reason why BATNA is so important is that it allows you to make the best use of your assets. In the book, Getting to Yes, they use one example that I always find very poignant. There's a wealthy merchant and he is negotiating with, a wealthy tourist, and he's negotiating with a street merchant for a brass pot. Now, the tourist has a significant sum of financial resources, but the street merchant has a good BATNA because he knows what he can sell this brass pot to. He knows what the market is. say the tourist doesn't know. He hasn't done his research. He doesn't know what's out there. He doesn't know the market, and he doesn't know how much he could buy this pot for. So he will end up either overpaying for this brass pot, or he'll lose out on the opportunity to have something that he really wanted. And now Claude's going to talk about how to create a BATNA. Claude?
But first, I will thank Lisa for putting light on one of the 7 elements that I mentioned earlier, legitimacy. Here, only one of them knew what the standards were. So, how to create your BATNA? Roger Fisher and Bill Urey have identified 3 steps towards creating your BATNA. The first one is inventing a list of actions you might conceivably take if no agreement is reached. In other words, consider and list all possible alternatives you may have. 2, improving some of the more promising ideas. In this step, you will want to develop and evaluate each alternative to see if it's practical. You can use third-party sources or evaluation, for example, attorneys, experts, accountants, then rank those alternatives. 3, selecting tentatively, because as Lisa just said, your BATNA can move, the one option that seems best to pursue. The best choice will be your BATNA. There's nothing wrong, to the contrary, with having 2 or more BATNAs. Harvard teaching carries this one step further. After determining your BATNA, calculate the lowest value deal that you're willing to accept. This accounts for uncertainty and could be your worst case scenario. Would you give us some example, Lisa?
I would love to, Claude. So I'm going to give you the example of in a litigation situation, okay? Let's say you're entering into a negotiation or a mediation, and your client is they're already in litigation or arbitration. It doesn't matter, whatever the adjudicatory process is. Your BATNA is always going to be compared to the outcome of that proceeding, okay? And I'm going to talk you through how to analyze a BATNA in that setting. There's 6 steps. These are the 6 steps I use. They were not official, but if you were to take anything away from what I'm going to talk about today, please make it this, because invariably, when I'm mediating a case, most attorneys do not have a well-developed BATNA. And if you're a mediator, this is absolutely a critical skill to use to help the clients negotiate their deal and help them with negotiations. So the first step is, what is the value of the lawsuit or the arbitration? Now, this you will likely have done before you take on the case and as the case progresses. So for example, if you're a plaintiff's attorney and there is a personal injury action, you're going to look at all the elements. Say, okay, I'm strong on duty and breach. We've got some causation issues, but we have damages. We have solid damages. I think we can make a claim of $100,000. So you evaluated the case at $100,000. That's your first step, all right? The second step is, what is the likelihood of success of getting that $100,000 for your client? Now, there's a lot of factors that go into this. You could say, well, we're a little bit weak on the causation issues, or there's always the expectancy, we don't know what's going to happen because there's absolutely no certainty ever, which is a given. So if you're asking your counsel to say, okay, what is your best case scenario? What do you think? You want $100,000, what's your best case scenario? Let's say counsel says, we have an 80% chance of recovering $100,000. Okay, 80% chance. So let's put a number on that. That's $80,000. Just like Claude said, when he said worst case scenario, we're on the same page, Claude, as always. I always want to ask the counsel, okay, now I know your BATNA, what's your worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that's going to happen and they may say, okay, well, actually, the plaintiff's not a great witness. We have a lot of problems on causation, and there's some tweaking with the damages, maybe 40%. So that's going to be $40,000. So now we have a range between $80,000 and $40,000. And sometimes I'll ask, okay, what do you think is going to be the likely scenario? What do you think is the likely outcome of this? And counsel must say 65% is a fair estimate of what is likely going to happen. Oops. Should I continue? Sorry. Okay. Okay, so now we have a high, we have a low, and we have a likelihood scenario. So we have a range, and that's good. That's good to look at. 80-40 with probably $65,000. The third step is one that everybody underestimates. And this is, okay, what is it going to cost you to get to that $80,000 or that $65,000 or even that $40,000? What are your costs? I want to know your cost to date and what's it going to take you from now to get to the end of trial, right? This includes everything from institution fees, arbitration fees, court fees, attorney's fees, court reporter fees, paralegal fees, travel fees. Everything needs to be analyzed. If you have expert witnesses, how much are those expert witnesses going to cost? You need to know realistically what is going to cost you to get to that number. And then I'll also want to know, okay, well, what is the projected time? When do you think this will go to actual trial? Or when do you think the arbitrators are going to be able to render an award? Let's say 2 years, okay? So working with our hypothetical that we were talking about, remember our range from 80-40 with 65% liability. Let's say that the client has already spent $5,000 in cost. But to get to the end of trial, it's going to cost another $25,000. So you're looking at a total sum of $35,000. So the best monetary scenario would be 80,000 minus 30. So their best recovery is going to be $50,000, right? And what's going to be their worst? 40, 30, 10,000. And you can also calculate what's likely to happen. Now, this is important because remember, $50,000 today versus $50,000 in 2 years is quite a difference because money loses power over time. It's not the same. The fourth step I'll ask counsel is about the non-monetary cost. And what is that? The cost to your relationship. Is your business being dragged through the mud? The cost to your personal relationships, the cost to your health, the sheer cost of time. Okay. Even if counsel were to say, well, I'm not, I've hired in-house counsel to take care of this, so it's really not costing us anything. Really? Well, no, because you're paying your in-house counsel a salary. And how much time are they devoting to this project? They could be putting that time and effort towards something else. So there is a cost to everything. The last step of this is taking all of these sums, recognizing the interest, the relationship issues, the time factor of 2 years, the realistic money components that you're looking at, and putting it in a pragmatic term of what can the client get today or give up today versus what is their reality going to look like in the future. And let's say that they're given an offer of $50,000 today, and they get best case scenario, and they're getting $50,000 in the future. Arguably, it may be more valuable for them to get that $50,000 today and to be able to use it than to wait 2 years and come out the same, actually, arguably less, because the money won't be the same value, and they've lost all that time. So now, Claude is going to talk about how to create BATNAs in a business setting outside the context of litigation.
Despite the excellent rationale that Lisa has given, you realize that it's highly speculative to configure your BATNA without knowing the circumstances. And this is the very reason I have insisted on why you have to prepare and assess what your counterpart's arguments and BATNA might be. Nevertheless, your BATNA will be determined by looking at all relevant factors, such as, in a commercial setting, for example, What are your economic realities? Other suppliers, retailers, distributors, resources, IP, workers, licenses, other ventures. All of this have to be taken into consideration while articulating your BATNA. In a financial setting, you have to take care of financing, loans, interest rates, loan to value, thresholds, covenants, shares buyback, share options, etc. In an employment setting, termination with severance and reference, training for new employment, other employment prospects, start new business. In real estate, either sell or buy your property. What's the value of the lease? What's the cost of a new construction? Other venues? What's the difficulty of getting a mortgage and what will be its duration? Let me conclude with a very simple example. And that's a very common one. Let's say I want to sell my car. Lisa wants the same car as mine, and she loves the color of my car. We have an appointment tomorrow afternoon at 5. What should I do in the meantime? Well, the most obvious thing to do is stop by my friend mechanic and ask him how much he is prepared to buy my car. He will tell me 5,000 euros. I have my BATNA for our tomorrow's afternoon meeting. How do you get to the other party BATNA, Lisa?
Well, you have to know the BATNA of the other side. It's absolutely critical. And why? First off, because then you know what to offer them, what's going to be attractive to them. For example, what if you know that the other side what if you know that they're a little bit cash poor right now, and you know what they could get, say you know that they could get $100,000 in trial, but you know that they're cash poor, so they may take something like 80,000, 90,000 now because that's more valuable to them. It's also important to not only know the other party's BATNA, but how you can change it. Because when we change the other party's BATNA, we also change our own. We want to increase our leverage and decrease their leverage. So one way you can do that is by changing the other side's perspective on their BATNA. What do I mean by this? Well, for example, again, let's go with our defendant has estimated their exposure to say $100,000 exposure at trial. And you've uncovered an expert report in your mediation that you find to be quite credible. And the defendant actually realizes that it is quite credible. And that objective standard, the expert report that they rely on also, is going to help modify their BATNA. And it's going to help them adjust that and realize, oh yeah, our BATNA is not as great as we thought it was going to. Now, telling another side that their BATNA is not great just because you know it is not going to help. But what you can do is help modify it by looking at objective standards. For example, looking at market rates, comparatives that both sides can agree on the comparatives, an agreed upon standard, a health standard, independent expert report that both parties agree on. If there's a property issue, a surveyor that you both agree on. You can also change the other side's BATNA by affirmative actions that increase your leverage. And what does that mean? Well, seizing assets, obtaining an injunction, putting a lien on a house, getting a favorable jurisdictional award. Those kind of things will invariably change the other party's BATNA because now they've got a different set of circumstances in which they have to face. You've increased your leverage and decreased theirs. Another way to change another party's BATNA is something that has nothing to do with you, but external factors. For example, a labor strike, a natural disaster, COVID, a decline in the housing market. Their employee that you're suing because of his actions was subsequently arrested for the same crime of which you are accusing them of, things like that. Now, Claude is going to present more arguments of how your choices in mediation outweigh possibly your BATNAs.
And that's the good news. you can, as Lisa suggested, outweigh the BATNA. Proponents of mediation will argue that effective communication and negotiations in mediation will often create a resolution better than one's BATNA. For example, it can be demonstrated if the BATNA for the opposing party is a lawsuit. If you know the other party's interest, which we have just talked about, you can offer them a mutual satisfier to meet those interests that they would not achieve in a lawsuit, thus making a negotiated settlement their preferred path. Let me give you two examples I've had in recent mediations. The first one was a dispute between a Paris store landlords and their Japanese fashion tenant upon the lease renewal. The Japanese guy had refused any increase of the yearly rent, thus blocking the lease renewal. His BATNA was a 3-year lawsuit, at best. His interest was a short-term renewal, allowing him, when I say short-term, meaning renewal in a short term, allowing him to sell his lease because his business was not a successful one. The mediation agreement provided for a 9-year renewal, the lease amount being increased only after a 6-month period, during which the tenant will make his best efforts to sell the lease at an agreed-upon price, and the potential surplus being shared equally between landlord and tenant. Within 3 weeks, the tenant sold and went back to Japan with 125% of what he was expecting, whereas the landlord covered their rebate 12 times. The second example was a dispute, again between a landlord and a tenant, over a very well-located hotel in Paris. During the past years, the landlord has accepted to reduce the lease twice upon tenant's request, but he had refused tenant's third attempt to reduce the lease. They were in court, and both their BATNA was a judge's decision. Tenant had repeatedly stated that the hotel cannot generate a lease comparable to other hotels of the same size, because 4 floors of the building were rooms, and the other 4 floors were food, beverage, and banquets outlets, and that the room revenue was 80%, whereas the food and beverage revenues were somewhat between 0 and 10% at best. After 4 hours, they reached an impasse. They, therefore, decided, in rather friendly terms though, to let a judge decide for them. But before letting them leave the room, I asked them a genuine question. Have you ever considered converting 2 of the food and beverage floors into rooms? That would increase your revenues without changing your lease amount. After a long silence and smiling faces, the landlord looked at the tenant and said, if you decide to go in this direction, we, the landlord, pay for the works. Well, by courtesy, they sent me the building permit application last week. This being said, I leave it to Lisa to move to our next related topic, and you will see how related is related, creative problem solutions, known as CPS.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Claude. You are perfect on time, and your explanation were very, very interesting. And as you pointed out, it's very important to understand this concept or the way you practice it. We practice them in order for a party to be able to be stronger at the table of negotiation mediation, but also, as you mentioned, that lawyers are very often unprepared or not enough prepared. So we are very happy with this type of comments, because we thought that the Med Lab had a mission, and this is one of the missions. So thank you very much. And let's move to the other one, CPS.
Terrific. Thank you. And Claude, thanks for those examples. Those are probably 2 of my favorite ones of yours. So let's now talk about CPS. What is that? Creative problem solving. Creative problem solving generates innovative and original solutions by using creativity. It's a concept that was developed in the 1940s and formalized by a creative theorist named Alex Osborne, who also invented brainstorming. CPS advocates divergent thinking. The idea is to create as many options as possible, and that way to figure out what you'd like to do. It has been used predominantly in business situations, in management situations, education, research, social innovation. In my experience, the term CPS has not been used in mediation. I haven't heard the two correlated. However, the skills are used in mediation all the time, whether we call it CPS or not. This is what we do. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages to using CPS. The advantages are that it creates innovative and original solutions. It's flexible and adaptable to different types of problems. It encourages collaboration and teamwork, and it can be used by people of all levels of creativity. And as Claude mentioned, in litigation, it's an imperfect system because you're not going to have the benefit of these creative solutions that you can come up with mediation. CPS really is a part of that. Of course, there's limitations too. One is it can be difficult to implement some innovative solutions. Two, it requires a certain level of creativity and open-mindedness. Three, it can be long and tedious. And four, it can reveal some weaknesses. There's workarounds with this we can talk about later, but right now Claude's going to tell us how to use CPS generally.
Unlike distributive bargaining with a zero-sum game, integrative problem solving tends to allow for expanding the pie by using such techniques as I just explained in the two examples I have mentioned. CPS has a core, it's not like text has two-step, it's a core four-step. The idea is to generate many options and defer judgment, using positive language to stimulate creativity. The general idea is that it is first expensive and later reduces the options and ideas generated. Step one, generating. So the idea, again, is to generate as many ideas as possible without worrying about their feasibility or realism. This stage is important for stimulating creativity and opening up new perspectives. We will discuss this as brainstorming in a short while. Step two, You've noticed that Lisa has a much better command of His Majesty language. It's unfair, and I should look for my BATNA here. Conceptualizing. Good. It's about combining and exploring the ideas generated. Step three, optimizing. This is the step you develop solutions. Evaluate the ideas generated and select the most promising ones. I insisted on the S at ones. You need to stay with several solutions. This stage is important to ensure that the proposed solutions are feasible and viable. Step four, implementation. In this stage, embarking on the retained solution or solutions, you together formulate a plan. This stage is important to ensure that the proposed solutions are effective. Now, can we compare CPS and BATNA, Lisa?
Why, Claude, of course we can. And let's do that now.
She's magical.
Well, if you all are thinking, BATNA sounds awfully similar to CPS, you would be right, but there are distinctions. They're two of the same coin, basically. BATNA, you're talking about inventing. CPS, you're talking about generating. BATNA, improving. CPS, conceptualizing. BATNA, selecting. CPS, optimizing. And then there's implementation. They both have the same cores of expansion and then contraction. But what's one key difference? One key difference is when you're talking about BATNA, you're talking about alternatives. When you're talking about CPS, you're talking about the generations of options within your mediation or negotiation context. Now, how CPS is used conceptually in mediation is basically, I think, two ways. One, it is expansive to create and evaluate as many options as you can. And another way it's also used is to shift perspective. It helps you get out of an impasse, evaluate potential solutions, and it creates new options by looking at things from a different perspective. Now, Claude's going to talk about the most popular CPS technique, brainstorming.
For that, I want to compare BATNA and CPS using a previous example.
Okay.
So we're not today, we're tomorrow. It's 5:30. Lisa and I have been talking about my car for a while. Remember, the mechanic gave me 5,000 euros. I think that Lisa is about to give me 6,000, but she's not completely ready for it. Well, CPS is also generating options. The reason why I sell my car is because I'm moving to Corsica. I won't need my snow tires anymore. They're worth 0 for me. They're worth 400 or 500 euros for her. So accepting her, making her accept the 6,000 euros and offering her my snow tires, which cost me nothing, is an option. And that is CPS versus BATNA. Technique. Technique is based really on what Osborne described in 1953 as brainstorming. It's a group technique that involves generating, as I said earlier, as many ideas as possible in a limited time. We agree to tentative agreements. Nothing is done deal until the end, until the very end. Do not evaluate options until the end. The general ground rules are, first, what are the interests? Second, come up again with as many ideas as possible. Third, stay focused on interest. Do not go off on tangents. Fourth, evaluate later. That means no criticism as well as no applause. Fifth rule, those in power should not criticize because that will chill creativity. Brainstorming is key to developing mutual satisfiers in integrative bargaining. This is particularly true to expand the pie by examining the concept of value. For example, items of non-equal value, what is costly to one party is not to the other, my snow tires, and things that have value to a party beyond money. This can include an apology, a vacation, a recommendation, continued health benefits, access to records, accounting, etc. Another one that very few people think about is risk allocation. One can be a risk to one party and not to the other. Allocation of such risk brings a lot of value to the table. I'm sure you have another technique, Lisa.
I do have another technique. We're going to move on to now what they call a one-text procedure. This is where you use a one text, a drawing, or a writing, and you use the interest of the parties as a guide, and as such, then the text is revised. An easy example of this is, say, an architect is drawing a house, and he asks both parties, the husband and the wife, for what they would like. So she tells him what she wants, and the husband tells the architect what he wants. He comes with the drawing. He says, how about this? And like, no, I want the kitchen over here. I want the garage here. That's a one text procedure where you take the interest and you continually revise the document or the drawing until you get take it as far as you can, or the parties reach an agreement as to what they want. Claude, do you have another technique for us?
Yeah, but before, I want to point out to all our people listening to us that you're still dealing with an issue. Lisa cannot figure out whether I was a mediator before an architect or an architect before a mediator.
So you use the one text technique quite a bit, right? I imagine.
I want to talk to you about something very weird, which is called synectics. Synectics inspires a thought process that the subject may not be aware of. The definition of synectics is, it is a technique that involves comparing a problem with another field to generate new ideas. Don't confuse, it's not comparing apple and pear. By making connections between seemingly unrelated ideas, we can come up with a new and innovative solution to problems. Here are some of the specific synectic techniques that can be used in negotiation. Making metaphors, making direct analogies, making personal analogies, making symbolic representations. Another technique is the what-if scenarios, Lisa.
Yes, and actually Claude gave us a perfect example of the what if, although he didn't use the term what if. But he did ask the parties in the hotel context, what if you converted these two floors? And I thought that was a very genius example of the what if scenario.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, what if is used creatively because it creates more options, as Claude did in that case, but it can also test theories. And as a mediator, I actually use it quite a bit when we're developing options, or the parties are developing options, and you're trying to see if that option actually will really work. So you can put it on the parties and say, well, how would you structure a contract if you have to start with a new vendor, for example? Or how would you respond if? It's a very effective tool to not only testing situations, but coming up with new ones. Claude, do you have another technique?
Yes, and in fact, it is a sub-technique of brainstorming, which is to favor quantity over quality. The idea is to come up with numerous ideas and to later evaluate and discard the bad ones. It's really another version of brainstorming. Can we use mind mapping in CPS?
Yes, we can. And going with a theme of brainstorming, mind mapping is yet another version of brainstorming. And what you do is visually, you are brainstorming by using pen and paper. And this can be quite effective in mediation by using a whiteboard, for example. If you want to show the parties what the contract or the new joint venture that they're talking about will look like, it's a very effective way to brainstorm by using visual techniques. What about switching roles, Claude? How is that as a technique?
Well, it fights what is called the paradigm blindness, which is also known as the curse of knowledge, which is a very well-known cognitive bias for experts in their field. They only look at things the same way all the time. What you're asking them to do is to wear a different hat. The idea is to shift your perspective to approach the problem from a different perspective, from a different angle. Example, if you're an entrepreneur, try thinking as one of your customers, or a gardener, or anything else. Another very efficient technique, which I use sometimes in mediation, is to switch sides at the negotiation table. Sit in their chair. What do you think they think? Another technique, Lisa, is walk away, isn't it?
Yes, it is, walking away. And that can mean mentally or physically. So let's talk about that. Deliberate mind walking is the theory of walking away, and it allows the party to release control and give themselves a mental break to come up with new ideas. In mediation, I find it's also helpful sometimes to take a physical break because it allows the parties to take a step back and rejuvenate themselves and come up with some new ideas, digest information, or maybe shift their perspective. A similar technique to that is also called the 30,000-foot view. This is zooming out. This is where you feel like the parties are losing the forest for the trees. A common thing, I use this in a lot of ways to shift perspectives, but also towards the end of mediation, sometimes you'll see the parties are getting anxious, they're tired, they're going like they're just going to agree to things because they want to be done with it, or they're stuck on a number and you know this is not going to resolve if they're still stuck on that number. So I'll say, let's zoom out for a minute. What is this going to look like in 10 years? Will this be as important to you then? You're basically helping them, coaching them with negotiation. You don't want them to lose a good deal or something that they may be happy with because they've stuck on this term. or you don't want them to regret and ruminate over terms that later they're going to regret just because they want to get it done today. So that's taking the 30-foot view, it's zooming out, giving them perspective, and making sure that they reach a solution that is the best one that they can reach given the terms and situation. And Claude's going to talk about our last two techniques today. Go ahead, Claude.
Yeah, Lisa said when you're flying at 30,000 feet, you can zoom out. Well, that's the fashionable one. It says thinking out of the box. That's also zooming out from the problem, shifting context to find solutions or shifting perspective. It can also give a party a narrative to save face. That's very important in negotiation, even more in mediation. Something like, you were thinking about this and that. How about doing this instead or before that? This can be done in mediation to shift perspective or break an impasse. For example, looking at a personal matter as business. Shift focus of discussion from liability to damages. Shift focus from fighting over property to using it for a mutual interest or a neutral interest, like charity or child. Example, in a divorce, one of the spouses wants €500,000. The other one refuses. Would it be the same if the demand was for a roof for our kids rather than a monetary amount? That's shifting focus. Another technique is problem reversal. It's using the opposite perspectives to solve problem, focusing on going against the norm. Look at back to front, inside out. Look at a half-full glass rather than a half-empty one. We have already discussed this earlier when suggesting to switch sides. Try to switch context. In your opinion, what would the guru reply to his disciple who's asking whether he could smoke while praying? An obvious no. Well, what would be the guru's reply if the disciple has asked, can I pray while I smoke? Thank you very much. We are right on time and are going to receive congratulations, I believe, from Catherine.
Yes, of course, you will receive congratulations. Thank you very much for your presentation, both of you. So it was very interesting, and so very interesting to see how we can help parties to be more creative through BATNA and through CPS. It shows definitively that how parties are involved in the solution through mediation, and so mediation and solution is for the parties. And so it's very, very interesting. So just for the participants, you can raise questions on the icon Q&A. And so we will manage with Catherine to raise questions to Lisa and Claude. You can also add comments on the icon comments. Just to try to introduce questions. So Catherine and I, we have few questions for you, Lisa and Claude. I would like to have to address a very practical questions. I understand from your presentation that the mediator may help the parties to construct or to determine their BATNA if the party come to mediation without making that job before. How you think that a mediator can do that with the party during a caucus, or do you think that a mediator is still independent if the mediator helps a party to make its BATNA, her BATNA?
Is that question to me, Pierre?
Or to you or to Claude, I don't know.
I can start, Claude, if you want. Yes, I think, but let me tell you, when you are examining a party's BATNA or helping them construct a BATNA, there's a particular timing to it. You don't want to do it too early. It's something that you're going to encounter in the negotiation phase after there's been effective communication and exploration of all the issues. It's going to be at the end of the negotiation phase. And most often it is something that I would do in a private caucus. And the reason for that is because you don't, you're exploring things in a curiosity way. You don't want to make anyone defensive. You don't want to imply that the attorney hasn't done their job. You're merely trying to flesh out what their best case alternative is. So you see if it's a practical thing and what you can do about it. So when I do it, you have to approach it with curiosity, be very mindful of your tone and how you're doing it. And remember, it depends on how you do it. If you say, oh, well, yeah, I've seen what you're talking about, and I don't think this is going to cut it on causation, that's evaluative, that's not appropriate. Your opinion really doesn't mean anything unless they've asked for it. What I would say is, you've heard the plaintiffs talk. Tell me how you feel about that. Does this impact your evaluation? Have you changed your position at all in light of what they've presented today? How do you think a jury or a judge would take this? Do you have any modifications for that? What do you think about this? You always ask the attorney what is their evaluation. It's not your evaluation, it's theirs. You're just there to help them flesh it out, that's all. And if a client is looking at you like, what are you doing to my attorney? I always comfort them and say, don't worry. I always kind of take all counsel to task on this. This happens on the other side too. Your client's doing an excellent job, because you certainly don't want to make any counsel defensive. That's not going to help you get anywhere. That's my 2 cents on it. Claude?
What a wonderful demonstration of the richness of mediation. I would do exactly the opposite.
That's really true.
Remember that I was trained by Gary Friedman, who doesn't do any caucuses. And except in very special cases, I wouldn't do it in caucuses, because can you think of a better way to lay out the interest of each party than to help them concurrently making their BATNA in front of each other? I can't.
Yeah, but if you're talking about the evaluation, the number of evaluations that they put on their cases, I don't know. I see your point with respect to interest. When you're talking about numbers and exposure, I'm not sure that all counsel would be amenable to discussing that in a joint session. Some would, but not all.
Good point. Good point. I forgot to say that before starting the mediation, I send a spreadsheet to each party to prepare and list their 7 elements and figure out the other party's 7 elements.
Mm-hmm. So that means that
preparation is key.
Yes, that means that you invite parties to prepare that BATNA before coming to mediation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answer. I just one more question, and so Catherine, after you have also a question before we go to the questions. How you can obtain from the parties that they accept to play, for example, when you use CPS, how you can obtain from them they accept to play a role, for example, the role of the other party. Have you faced already a situation where parties refuse to do that, refuse to play the game?
Go ahead, Claude.
Yes, and vice versa.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I use humor very much. And when it works, it becomes like a game, and they're happy to do it. You know what? Replace me at the whiteboard. Why don't you use the whiteboard in my place? And I remain seated. Change side. What do you think they will reply to this question?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it won't work, but you know it, so you don't try, or you do it in caucus.
I would say the same. It's very fluid. Before I mediate any case, I have conferences with the counsel, and I also talk about the structure of the mediation, if they want to do it in joint session, if they expect just shuttle diplomacy, which some of them do, or if they are amenable to a combination of both. So you really get a feel for the style also of the counsel and the clients and what you think is going to work. Some cases it won't, and sometimes it will.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lisa. and Claude are great sharings for us and for the public, and it's very interesting. And it's also amusing to see how we can use the same tools differently, and as mediators, of course, and how we manage things the same way or in a different way. I have two quite basic questions as far as BATNA is concerned, and maybe a more tricky one as far as the interaction between BATNA and CPS is concerned. So for the BATNA, do you make any, first question is, do you make any difference between BATNA and Plan B? And second question, I put the two questions together because they're quite basic. Second question is, do you use and would you share a kind of IA tool for calculating a BATNA that could help you or help the parties, of course not you, but help the parties or the lawyers to calculate the BATNA? IE or something like, you know, a preconceived tool that could help you and the parties to calculate their BATNA.
Shall I go first?
Sure.
Second question first. Go on Amazon and get a book which is called Beyond Reason by Bob Mnookin. It's 500 pages. It's not IA, but it's the same. They explain to you how to calculate the value of your trial. First question, the difference between BATNA and Plan B. I would say that BATNA is Plan A. No. There should be a difference between BATNA and Plan A. Plan B is what Lisa called the something wire, the trial wire, something like that, or the reservation value. That would be Plan B, your worst case scenario. Plan A is what you come to the table with if you have not made any preparation. BATNA is better than Plan A. Now I can address the fourth question on the Q&A, which is how to sell the BATNA. I think there's a very easy way to sell the BATNA. Do not go to a negotiation without a BATNA. That is committing suicide. I cannot find a best marketing tool than that.
Okay, Claude, I'm going to read the questions because I'm not sure everyone is having
But
the
maybe Lisa wants to answer your question, Catherine, first.
No,
okay, fine.
Oh, it's a Plan B or Plan A? I think Plan A is what you're prepared to go into negotiations for, knowing the other side's BATNA, knowing what their interests are, what you're going to be offering. In some respects, I think arguably, yeah, you could say your BATNA is Plan B, because if you don't lock things up at the table today, that's going to be the reality of your situation. So that's your measuring standard. So Claude and I aren't exactly aligned on that, but I think it's more a matter of semantics.
Okay, and a calculation tool, I mean, less than 500 pages, do you have?
Yeah, don't read the conclusion.
Calculation tool is basically walk through the six steps that I did today. You're going to want to know that. If you're in litigation, you need to go thoroughly through all that. Arguably, if you are looking at bringing a case or even taking on a case, you will have looked at all of those things before. It's just good business sense. Your client's going to want to know how much they're going to be in for. They're going to want to know the likelihood of success at trial and what they could stand to win, what they're going to lose. And you, as a business decision, a lawyer should also know that information. So if you go through those 6 steps, you may not have all of the interest because you won't know the other sides yet, but you will know your clients. And that's important.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with this answer, and I have prepared my own actually when I am helping the lawyers more often in caucus. I would say to work, or the parties to work on the BATNA. So I have another question, but there is on the chat maybe a question that on which Claude started to give an answer. So I'm going to read the question from Sarah Temple-Boyer, and thank you very much for the question. I have a question about how to sell the BATNA to the parties, whether you act as a lawyer or as a mediator. Do you have a marketing tip to convince the parties to work on their BATNA, which is key, I understand? In any dispute context, clients are eager to raise and focus on the strengths of their case instead of working on their BATNA, which could make them think that you believe that their case is not so strong.
I'm trying to, okay, how does...
I'm wondering whether Sarah believes that you should put your BATNA on the table as an opening, which is not the case. You keep your BATNA secret.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is not a show of weakness. It doesn't make you stronger or less strong, but it is something that you need to know for yourself coming to the negotiation.
I think if you're the attorney, if I'm reading the scenario correctly, if you're the attorney, and yes, clients always, they get stuck on this number that they're going to get in trial, but you know, it's your duty as an attorney to tell them the strengths and the weaknesses of their case, thoroughly analyze it, let them know what it entails time-wise, cost-wise. So it's not a matter of really selling a BATNA to them, it's looking at the reality of the situation. When you're in a negotiation and mediation context, as a mediator, I will ask counsel about their BATNA beforehand, privately, before the mediation even starts. And so they'll know that it needs to be fully developed, or they need to think about it. And usually they talk to their clients and say, okay, this is the reality of the situation that we're looking at. So I'm not sure if it's so much of a selling point as a realistic, if we don't settle today, this is the option that will be available to you. This is a likely case scenario. This is the best case scenario.
And going back to our introduction, helping your clients define their BATNA in a serious way will make them investigate the 7 elements. It is not only about alternatives, it is to build the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which means that you have to take into consideration each one of the 7 elements.
Exactly. Because if you only look at it from a numbers point of view, you're really doing a disservice to your client. They may have reputational issues that are important, time elements that are important, cash flow issues that are important, relationship issues. And by looking at the 7 elements that Claude's extrapolated, you will be able to flesh all of that out and really see what your client interests are and how you can best serve him or her, and what kind of negotiation you want to help reach for them that's going to be in their best interest.
Before my appointment with Lisa, when I went to see the mechanic, do you think I went there without checking what was the official value of my car, given its mileage and its age? I checked the standards.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. We have some questions, so I would like to raise a very important question from Nathalie Eren. When is the mediation starting at your point of view? At the time of the first contacts with each of the parties, or at the first meeting with all parties, joint session, which is a very important question regarding confidentiality, for example.
It being specified that it's a little bit outside of the scope of the session of the Med Lab of today, but if you have a quick answer, because we have other questions then.
I would say it begins before, your confidentiality begins before, and any communications that I have with counsel, including sending the agreements and the confidentiality agreement, I always type as confidential. I have them submit mediation briefs, which I will look at. And I tell them that those are deemed to be confidential, and I won't share them with the other side unless they give me express permission to do so. So anything, not just the mediation itself, but I also treat anything beforehand as confidential as well.
I fully concur. That was a short one.
Perfect.
Right, and it's an important topic, very important. So we may have with the prevention and commission mediation something on that, but it's not technical as we want to have it for the Med Lab, not a technical tool for negotiation. So there is another question then, and thank you, Nathalie Ehren, for the question and for raising this. So another question from Maeva Slotin, which is question 1. Do you follow a set of schedule for managing mediation, like opening statements, setting the agenda, identifying options, etc.? Or do you play by ear or else? Another way?
So I think if I understand the question, it is, do you have a script that you follow,
Yes,
or do you
exactly.
modify it? Every mediation is different. So before I prepare for mediation, I am well versed to what I think are going to be the trips with the emotional components. I'm well aware of both the interests that I've read so far in the mediation briefs. I know what the numbers are. I know where the parties are at right now. But just because I know all the things doesn't mean I know where this is going to go. So I have a general, I talk to them at the beginning. I introduce mediation, set a calm and confident tone for the process, let them introduce themselves. And it depends also on what kind of mediation they want. If they want, I just had one last week. It had 9 different parties in it, and it was very contentious, and they wanted nothing to do with one another. It was complete shuttle diplomacy. Okay, so I had to tweak things a little bit to honor that request. And honestly, it was a good one because there was so much contention between the parties. To have them in the same room would have actually done more damage than good. If I'm able to have all parties in a joint session, what is that? Then I like to start off with a brief statement as to what brought them here. And if the parties are those that I think are going to be amenable to doing some problem solving at the beginning, we can set an agenda. Everyone varies, and it really depends on the parties and the council, where they're at, how emotional the matter is, and what your intuition is telling you. You may go in with an idea of what you'd like to do, and then you realize, yeah, that's not going to work right now. I'm going to switch this up a little bit. For me, it's very intuitive. Claude, why are you waving a stick at me?
Not at you. Maeva's question end with, or do you play by ear or else? When I have 2 or 3 parties, I will start with asking them to do an opening statement explaining what the dispute is about and what do they expect from this meeting. Explaining them that what I would like to do in the first step is to have an agreement over the disagreement. And then I play by ear. The reason why I brought this, that's my speaking stick, is when I have several parties, then I am a big fan of the Indian tribe of North Canada, which is the Peace Circle. And I will ask them to speak one at a time, once, in a clockwise setting. And the first question would be, what is the issue about? The second would be, how much and how have you been hurt? And the third circle would be, how do we repair it? And that's why I need this.
You need this to repair.
No, I need this to make sure that they only speak one at a time.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that. We have a very interesting question from Carlo Mastelon. Carlo likes the 7-element approach of your pre-first meeting preparatory questionnaire. But Carlo is asking the following question. Despite your training with Gary Friedman, I see that you do caucuses, also, if I understand correctly, only a limited extent. What about the timing? Do you arrange one full day of mediation, the English approach, or do you go slowly and arrange 2-3 meetings spread over a few weeks?
Well, there are 2 questions here.
Yes.
And I will start with the end. the Paris lawyers cannot set one full day. So unless we have a very big case, I always do half a day mediation, 4 hours. And I do not schedule for a second meeting because 3 out of 4 times we end up during the first meeting. When it's an important case or there are several parties, then I try to have a mediation for a full day. As to caucuses, as I mentioned at some point when I talked about saving face, and the difference between Gary Friedman and I is that Gary Friedman is a much better mediator than I am. So he's able to draw at the table everything. I do a caucus when I see that there's something that cannot come out, and I'm not talented enough to have it out at the during the joint session. Or, as Lisa suggested earlier, when it's a monetary issue and they do not want at this stage to articulate an amount, so they say it to me, but what's the use of saying that amount to me knowing that I cannot use it? And that's what the problem with caucuses is. What do you do with what you know and cannot use?
Thank you for the question, Claude. We are not going to answer to this one now. There are still some questions we would like to raise, and we would like Pierre and myself to take 3-4 minutes at the end, well, before the end, in order to announce the next capsules, the next topic. So a question for Lisa from Marik Rollens, which is in what is a mediation brief different from a trial brief?
Okay, a mediation brief varies in formality. It usually identifies the background as to where the parties are now. It identifies the likelihood of success, where they're at in the trial. If they've had any discovery, it will identify the status of that discovery, what's been revealed. It will often take a settlement position of what they're looking for. Sometimes parties will include other jury verdicts or decisions by the judge as guidance as for what they're looking for. So it depends on what the party does, but it's usually a statement as to what's going on, what is the situation, what's the harm, and what are they looking for to solve it. That's just a brief capsule. Sometimes they'll include exhibits, sometimes they'll include pleadings. I let them tell me what they want me to look at.
Okay, so I think that we have also another question, which is not directly linked with the topics, but it is a question from Myra Slotin. How do you manage aggressive parties or burst of emotions?
That's when I use caucuses.
Yes.
And also, Pierre, maybe we can mention that the first year of the Med Lab is dedicated to negotiating tools, and that we anticipate a second year of life of this Med Lab dedicated to more personal issues and interactions, like, you know, emotions, bias, and all that. So stay tuned.
But before you conclude, may I, in less than a minute, address Milagros' question?
Yes, of course.
How do you think the IA will affect in the future? And hopefully I will draw a laugh on everyone's face. I'd like to remind you that in IA, I stands for intelligence, for whatever this means. Fortunately, not for instinct nor imagination. That is still left to us.
Are you saying our jobs are not going to be eliminated with AI?
I think that computers still do not have instinct nor imagination.
So we have a little job security is what you're saying, Claude? That's good.
But you and I are young enough to wait for that.
Okay, thank you very much. It is a good conclusion. So we have still a lot of work as mediators. Thank you very much for your presentation and your time. And so it was very interesting to discover tools through your presentation, and you're very active and very practical presentations. So we will continue with other topics. Catherine, maybe you can remind the following topics for this year.
Okay, thank you, Pierre. Very quickly, because I would like Jacqueline to conclude. So 25th of, it's always a Thursday because it's easier. I'm not an IA, so I need, very basic. We need some very basic meetings. So 25th of April, 27th of June, and 26th of September. 25th of April, it will be in French about the la négociation raisonnée de Harvard, so the Harvard Principles negotiation steps that Claude mentioned at the beginning, but deeply extended by Hélène de Kovačič and Laurent Rouvière. 27th of June, it will be dedicated to distributive negotiation, ZOPA, Zone of Potential Agreement, anchoring, and it will be in English and conducted by Jonathan Lloyd-Jones and Bill March, who are distinguished members of the IAM, so International Academy of Mediators. And 26th of September, it will be probably in English or in French. We do not know yet. Probably in French, I would say. Two very practical tools: negotiation GPS, presented by Vincent Euriel, who is ESCP professor and teacher at the CMAP, and Jérémy Lac, who is a Swiss mediator and president of the Association francophone internationale de médiation. Thank you very much for your participation and presentations, Lisa and Claude, participations for the public, and everyone for your attention. So now, Jacqueline, it's your turn. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Catherine. First of all, I want to reiterate the thanks to Lisa and Claude for their amazing presentations. They clearly are very esteemed experts, and we are just honored and delighted to have you with us today. I'd like to thank Catherine, Pierre, Lofty, particularly for being the driving force behind developing this incredible training program. And I look forward to joining all of the other sessions which we will have. This was very instructive and very interesting, and I walk away convinced even more clearly that every lawyer should become an expert in negotiation, whether you are negotiating in litigation, whether you're negotiating settlements, whether you're negotiating a contract. There are so many ways we lawyers in our professions use negotiation and mediation, even when we are not in the formal context of a negotiation and mediation. So I would say this kind of a course, which provides not only the overall scope of the purposes and perspectives, but also provides very practical and instructive tips on how to actually put into place the practical and positive aspects of being a good negotiator. So I thought it was terrific. I am very excited to look forward to hearing the next ones. And I want to thank all of you who participated, all of our members. And for those of you who are non-members, I hope you enjoyed this webinar as much as I did, and that you will go to www.uianet.org to become a member of the UIA, so that you too can continue to enjoy the benefits of webinars such as this. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
soon on the 25th of April. Bye.
Looking
Yes.
forward to it. Bye.